Hello, everyone. My name is Curtis White from Beyond Backtesting. I'm a market enthusiast, highly experienced senior software engineer. Was hired by Microsoft as a premier field engineer in .NET in 08-09, passed all requirements. Went another route due to a hiring freeze, but I've worked as a senior software engineer ever since. And now I'm an AI ChatGPT prompt specialist. So those are kind of my interests: is markets, software engineering, and AI and prompting. And today I want to kind of combine all those interests, and I want to show you a real-world project where we're going to take a Tradestation performance report. It is a real-world project. It's not fully completed, but I want to try to utilize it for a real-world project to take a Tradestation performance report. I'm going to show you. I can show you here, and this has this trade list format, which is not very friendly in my opinion, where we have the buys and sells on different rows. And what I want to do is I'm going to combine these into a single row, and maybe I'll eventually also want to change this performance report and make a new report with just the information I want to see that's relevant for me in most cases. And importantly, I want to create this combine these. Here we see we have a buy and sell two different rows. I want to combine that into a single row and these prices into a single row, so I can then perform. I like this format a lot better. I can put a point value in there. I can calculate my sum out here for the theoretical change in price. And importantly, I want to be able to do this for any Tradestation performance report. And I don't want to just do it for one. Or I want to be able to do it for any report. I want to do it once. And so this is kind of the project we have for ChatGPT. Now, speaking of ChatGPT, a lot of people have seen ChatGPT, and the first impression I had was it couldn't do anything, because it will tell you it can't do stuff. It will tell you it cannot do stuff that it can, and it will also in some cases tell you it can do stuff that it cannot do. And so I would say probably the initial experience a lot of people have is, what's the big deal? Well, once you get into it in a deeper level, and that's part of the reason I call myself an AI prompt specialist, a ChatGPT prompt specialist, is you get to start to see that it appears to be a universal simulation, able to do universal natural language simulation. And that's kind of a mouthful, but if you think about computers, think about traditional software, it's based on a certain type of simulation, right? On a Turing machine. And this is a natural language universal. This is where they're working toward. It's not there yet, but I believe it's going towards a universal simulation engine. Okay, universal simulation engine driven by natural language. And that's going to change everything. And that's where a lot of my interest is. It's not really in the chat. Some of it is, I do personas and things, but a lot of it is, and I think language, the context potential for language translation is very powerful. But I do think a lot of this will be in the programming. There'll be programmers for GPT, but it's going to be a much more powerful, much more universal type of a programming, because it's going to be based on more on language and less on specific syntax and things of that nature. So that's where I think it's going, right? It's not there yet, but it always shows a lot of promise. And once you have a universal simulation engine based on this intelligence, on this type of a thing, potentially you could have operating systems would be based on this. Your actual operating system would be based on this. That's far into the future. It has a lot of limitations right now. Look back, it's 4K, 8K, which is essentially all the memory it has. But that's where it's kind of going. And anyway, this project was a goal to actually do something, to see if I could do something real, right? Where we have a lot of data and we want to do something for real. And so I'm going to be showing some of the processes that went into this and some of the successes and the failures as part of this. But the first thing we want to do is we want to do this once, and we want to be able to operate this to run these scripts on any performance report. Now, when I looked at this, I said, okay, what do I want to use? A Power Automate? Do I want to use Auto Hotkey? Well, the simplest way is simply to you want to get this developer toolbar. And again, I'm showing two different things here. I'm showing the actual process of actually solving this problem, which may be interest to some people, but I'm also showing the ChatGPT, which is probably interest to other people, and there'll be an interest to probably a set of people who are interested in both things. So it's not going to be quite as fast if I was just showing you how to do this, right? But one thing you want to do is you want to get your developer toolbar, and you want to record a macro, and you want to store that into your personal notebook. Now I'm going to press Alt F8 Alt F8 here. I hope this comes up. Okay. And you'll see I have personal, okay, here. If you don't record a micro note, you don't see that personal. Now that personal is going to allow me to store these VBA scripts outside of this particular workbook, which is going to allow me to run it against any report in the future. And so what we're going to be doing is so I can open up any of these standardized reports. I'm going to run my VBA script, and I'm going to transform it into the form I want. Now, the other thing we can do is press Alt F11. Now, if this Alt F11 doesn't work for you, check and see if you have GeForce driver, GeForce Experience installed, because that was preventing this from working for me. Press Alt F11, and it's just going to come up here, and this is the actual code primarily that ChatGPT made. Now, obviously, it's not 100% perfect, but this was the code that it made. I'm going to talk about some of the changes I had to make to it, and I'm going to show the kind of process that it made it. But one of the changes I had to make was it used, I believe it was called this workbook. I'm not going to type it out. I'm going to try not to do too much typing because I am traveling for a holiday. It's going to be probably loud. If there's a problem with the sound, that's why. But notice it says I changed this to active workbook. Okay. And because I'm storing this in my personal workbook, okay, and not into the performance report, okay, because I want to run this against multiple reports. That was just a small change I had to make. I had to change it from from this workbook to active workbook, which is the one that's selected. And this code was pretty much, other than that, was generated by ChatGPT. And so we're going to show how that works. But this is the transform code that transformed it here into this form. And eventually I could have potentially a point value lookup for different futures contracts. I could, add a rolling sum out here. I can change this performance report somewhere around. A lot of opportunity here to change this report into something that's more useful. Of course, this is just one way to do it, and maybe in this, I'm sure this is going to break for certain things, but different, there's, it may not be perfect, and maybe I'll go to some other way and just write out the trades in easy language or some other way. But this is the demo. This doesn't handle every case, right? We're assuming one buy, one sale. I haven't checked every other case. It's kind of a demo, right? But that's what you need to get started. So let me just recap. You want to create a personal notebook so you can store your macros, right? And so you can run it against it. So you can make this universal and run it against multiple Tradestation performance reports. Then you'll need to get that code, which I do share on my back testing Twitter feed, to do this if you actually want to run the specific code. Now let me show you kind of the process of how ChatGPT generated that. So my initial idea was to use this Corp Spreadsheet that I built, and which, talk about doing a lot of stuff first in ChatGPT. One of the things I built was this Corp Spreadsheet, which allowed me to create tables in a very efficient way within ChatGPT and generate code. And it did work for many of the samples that I created. I was able to create a table here. I was able to merge them. I was able to drop rows, or drop columns, add columns. And, that was my initial thought. Well, initially, I just created a Corp Spreadsheet as a demo. I thought, okay, this is the demo. It probably won't have a lot of real usage because there's all this look back and stuff. And then I realized, wait a minute, I can do this recording feature where I can compile this down into a script, and I can work with it in this natural language. I can work with a small set of data with a natural language without, and it adds a layer of indirection, right? When you're working this way, adds what's the benefit? Well, you're adding a layer of indirection, so I could even tell it to do stuff that I may not even know how to do, right? I may not know how to ask it to do. And then I could have it generate this code, and it actually worked. Here I was able to create a table. I was able to merge a table. I was able to give it. One of the cool things that I wanted to look at was, categorizing. Right, here's a good example where AI where the ChatGPT may have some advantage. Let's say I have a set of transactions with different. I want to categorize those transactions. Okay. They may not be in a simple form. I can say if, then, else, right? It could be hundreds of different words there, or the transactions could be all kinds of different in all kinds of different descriptions that I couldn't necessarily create a simple rule-based approach for. This is where the ChatGPT with its natural language can understand this and categorize stuff according to basic based on this understanding. So that's a very powerful use of it. But Of course, the problem is that the size limitation of it, right? So you'd have to make an API call for this to do this categorization on large sheets. So then I went back and said, okay, what about actually creating sheets and doing manipulations? And then I came with this form where I basically can work with it in this natural language using my Corp Spreadsheet prompt code and then merge it down. And it was so very close to working for the case, the real use case. That's okay. It worked for my demo cases. Let me put it to the test with a real use case, and it came so close. Let me show you what it actually did. But it would either get I was able to either get the headers or the prices or the rows, but I couldn't get both. It was like it would do one or the other. And the closest I got, let me pause this. And so this was the closest I got with that technique. It's pretty close, and I could have probably worked with it and changed the code to get this to exactly what I wanted. But you can see here we have some blank rows that are still left. And when I was working with it within the ChatGPT, it was able to do that and transform its own tables. But when it went to it failed when I went to generate the code. It couldn't transform. And I tried lots of different variations. I said, okay, maybe the whole telling it how to do stuff is just it doesn't help it. And then I tried to just show it. Okay, here's the first data, here's the second data. That worked even less well. So apparently it did, going through the process of doing it, somehow give it a little more information. I got closer. This is as close as I got, and you can see it, but wasn't 100%. But I did get the answer through ChatGPT, through my experiences, and part of this was language, right? So one of the things that that I realized early on is that is ambiguities or ambiguous language. In spreadsheets, you have tables, which are actually there are tables. You have columns, and columns can actually have names. You can have named columns. And I might say a column name, is the header name, but those are two different things. I might say a spreadsheet is a table, but it's not. It's not stored as a table. And so this shows one of the things this shows is some of the tricks I use. Because it doesn't. If I say store this as a sheet, it's not going to understand how to store that. And so I created this this kind of a language here, so that I could tell it this is a spreadsheet, but you can still display it as a table. And this is kind of some of this is where the language and where having clarifications would be helpful. But also this shows some of the tricks I use, right? And getting able to work with this as a spreadsheet. And again, we came very close here. Got the it did everything right. And then when I came to generate the script, it just failed at the script generation. We get maybe halfway there or something, and I'm not going to try to debug the script because the whole point was to see if I could do it with the ChatGPT. So it came very close, and I couldn't really break it down because I was like, okay, drop the columns and another example of language I think where that could cause a problem is merge, right? And that can be merged cells, right? Which is not what we're trying to do. So that was the tricky part, but we got very close here. We can see here, I create this sheet with inside the Corp Spreadsheet. And one of the things we talk about as I talk about being a prompt specialist, or one of the goals when we're working with these GPTs is just to get information we want. So notice it doesn't show or talk or do a lot of stuff. And normally it's just going to give you a lot of verbiage. It just says create a new sheet, right? And that's what we want, right? When we talk about AI as a tool, we want to get it. If we want it to talk chatty, we want it to talk chatty. If we don't want it to talk at all, we don't want it to talk. And that was very nice. Is that this makes it efficient to actually work with. And whereas if you just start a prompt up without this header code, it's going to sit there and tell you how to do all this stuff, and that's not what we're trying to do here. So this is very, in one sense, it's very promising. And, here it created this code, which was very close, but wasn't quite there. And maybe, again, if I debugged it or looked at it closer, I could have found a trivial mistake with it or error, but it just didn't seem like it was able to get quite there. Here I'm showing the transformation desired. Okay. Now, I'm going to show the actual code now, that the method I used to get this solution. Well, here's another attempt where I was still not giving up on this. I was able to create my table showed it as a table, did my recording, and then I, was able to combine these, and it generated the right output here. Then I, tried to use this kind of pseudo recording, see if that helped or not, and I don't know that it did anything really. But then I tried to create this script off of it, and this is how close it got. You can see here, probably pretty close, but I had to give it a lot of hints, and just wasn't able to get there completely, right? So here's what it gave me. Okay, I'll go this through a little slower so you can see this. Let me go up here. So this was this is the Corp Spreadsheet. Okay. Create the table. Okay. Show me the table. Start recording. The idea was it could translate that into operations, which it did work in many of the demo cases, right? And then combine these into one row, and then generate the code. This is what it came up with, and tried to get it to, and it just wasn't able to quite get there. So this is actually the way the code that I got to work. And first, I created a simplified case for it. And this is an interesting case as well. First, I created a simplified spreadsheet, just the whole idea of, can we get these buy and sell IDs? And one of the things I did, which may have been the difference, is in the original report, this is not an ID field, it's just a number, trade number field. And that, I said, okay, this is harder to talk about when it's a numbers pound symbol. I changed that to ID, and that might have been 80% of why this method worked better. But I did one of the things, and this is again a lesson when we're working with ChatGPT, is try to use descriptive names for anything you can, because that will give it hints when it generates the code or the prompt. You want to make it descriptive as possible, because that's how it's maybe seeing it, right? So I did do that, so I said create a script that will create a new sheet, and with the single row per ID, and this is what it created here, and it worked. Okay, and then but it was still just for this demo case. And now here was the real powerful. This was very, I think, impressive too. Was here's the original code, right? And it's for that demo case. Now I give it the actual format. I did drop the columns, make it simpler, but now I give it the actual format, which includes some extra fields, the date field, and now I give it the task of, okay, can you generalize the code that you created for this layout? And this is what it created, and this worked as well, right? I believe very, very few changes, if any. So continue. So let's see where it did the. So this is the one thing. Is just when I can put it into the personal workbook, I have to change this workbook to active workbook. That was the only change I had to make, and maybe the sheet name, the actual sheet names, right? So that was how I did it. Okay. I gave it a simple case, and then I said generalize, which is pretty impressive if you think about it, that it was able, even though there's not a lot of difference in this form, it was able to generalize to this form, and then it generated this code. Okay. So that is, that's pretty much all for this video, and maybe we'll go into another transformation in the future. But there's a lot of fails early on too, where it would seem like I was almost there. It was going to be, it was tantalizingly close, and then it would just fail on the output of the script. It would be close, and that was, that's kind of why I've seen in a lot of times in this AI stuff, it gets so close, but it can't quite get there unless you know how to, unless you've worked with it long enough to know how to get it to actually do that, right? To get to that last step. So this completes the video. I hope it was helpful. So that's how we did that. I hope it helps, and I'll be sharing more in the future.